Hey folks, Cool18 here, and welcome to another Unity 3D tutorial on how to make a multiplayer first-person shooter. Now, in the last episode, we got health and shooting working, in that we could go and blow up this crate. Well, and by blow up, I mean have it simply disappear as soon as it takes a shot. However, we did realize that there was a problem in that this crate's health and status was not being synchronized across the network. So if two players were connected, one player shot the crate, it disappeared for that player, but the other player could still see it. And so let's talk about why that is, and let's get it working. So first of all, looking at our player, you may recall, is synchronized across the network because of two reasons. One, the player has a photon view component, and that photon view is controlling or observing the network character script. And then our network character script is simply responsible for we're going to say every network frame, like every frame, but it's not actually every visual frame, it's every network frame. Every so often, on photon serialized view gets called, and it synchronizes the position. If we own the player, it sends our current position and rotation and so on and so forth. And if we don't own the player, if this is someone else's player, then we simply receive information from them about where they are. And then we keep everything synchronized, and that's good and lovely. So we're not doing any of that for our crate. Our crate doesn't have a photon view, and even if it had a photon view, it's not monitoring anything. So let's talk about a few little weirdness and gotchas that are going to happen here. First of all, especially with this crate is very different from our player because our crate is not being instantiated over the network. It starts in the scene. So I will say right away that is the very first gotcha, because I guess I'm going to go ahead and do that. We are going to put a photon view on this crate. But even with this photon view, if I observe health, okay, the health script on here, and then I go into the health script and I put in a function called onPhotonSerializedView down here, onPhotonSerializedView would not get called. The reason it's not going to get called is, as far as I can tell, in the Photon Unity networking, onPhotonSerializedView only gets called for things that are instantiated on the network. Scene objects like this are not instantiated, so there's no update. In fact, as far as I can tell, this observe does nothing. I might be wrong about that, but as far as I can tell, it's not required for our crate. Now, that would be different if our crate was being instantiated at some point once you've joined the room. And so one thing you could do, if you definitely wanted that observe thing, instead of placing them in the scene like this, you could just have them spawn when the game gets created. So what you could do is put some sort of like empty object called crate spawn, and when you join the network, the crates spawn in those places. I may be wrong. There may be some other way to get this to fire properly. Like to properly register this as a scene view that should be getting observed, but it doesn't seem to work when I just put it in there. And if there's some way, I may revisit this. But that's okay, because actually for this crate, we don't necessarily need a real-time synchronization. That's not what we're necessarily interested in. We don't need an update about this crate to be sent every frame. In fact, that would just add extra network noise that we don't necessarily care about. What we care about is we need to update all the clients whenever this crate takes damage, and that's pretty much it. So we're actually going to use a different way to synchronize the data on this crate. And in fact, we're going to use that same sort of technique. Well, it's just going to be part of the health script, which is also going to work on players. That's the advantage of it, is we don't necessarily have to observe it. It will work kind of all over the place. So what am I talking about? Let's backtrack a little bit. What happens when we actually shoot the crate? Well, obviously we're using this player shooting script that we did last time. And we call fire when we're pushing down the mouse button, and then we shoot a ray forward and we figure out what we hit, and then when we finally figure out what we hit, assuming we hit something that has hit points, that has a health component to it, then we call take damage. Now, this take damage simply gets called on our machine, which is the problem, right? We point at a crate, we click the button, it blows up the crate on our machine, but it doesn't touch the network. The easiest way to solve this is, instead of calling take damage directly like that, just by going h.takedamage, instead we're going to make a remote procedure call. It's an RPC. Instead of calling the function directly, we are going to send a message out to the entire network that says, hey, call this function. And that's how it's actually going to get run. It's a very easy little change to make. So over here in our health script, take damage, we're going to flag this. We're going to identify this function as being an RPC, something that can be called remotely. And we simply do it like that. So now, take damage, this function gets a special flag inside of Unity and C# that tells the system that this can be called through a weird sort of indirect way. Now in player shooting, instead of this h.takeDamage, we're going to comment that out. We're going to call an RPC. So how do we do that? Well, first things first, we need to, for the object we're going to call an RPC on, we do need to grab a copy of its photon view. So even though we're not using the observed component here, we still need a photon view on this object because this is something that does have some kind of network presence. So it needs a photon view. All right. So our thing with health, we're going to go H. So we've got a component. We can either use the transform or the H. Doesn't matter. It's just a mono behavior that we can call get component on. And we're going to get the component called photon view. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that I'm doing this literally the best and most proper way. This is just a way of doing it. That'll get things working for us. It's kind of the motto with everything else. So we're going to get the photon view of our thing that we hit. Now, again, this line could fail. If you forgot to put a photon view, it'll give you an error right around here. We're gonna mutter on forward anyway. And we're going to say, okay, call an RPC on this. And RPC takes 3 parameters. It does come in two variants that are pretty much the same. The first parameter is the method name. Well, that's easy. That's called take damage. The second parameter is the one that has 2 options. You can either pass it a player, so send this message to a player specifically, or we can use photon targets, which is the most common way of doing it, and it specifies a sort of class of players to send it to. And generally speaking, you're going to go photon targets .all. In fact, that's what we're going to use for the very first version here. We're going to use photon targets.all. We want to send it to everyone that is connected. We want to let everyone know that this crate is about to take damage. Okay? Or rather, this object, this thing that we're hitting that has hit points, we want to let everyone on the server know that this thing is taking damage so that they can synchronize themselves properly. The third parameter is the parameters you're passing to the function. In this case, there's just a single parameter, damage. Okay? This is the equivalent of this line here. In fact, I should do this. Oops. This next line is the equivalent of calling except more networky. Right? These are technical terms. So this basically calls take damage on everyone on the entire server and lets them know that this goes. Okay, and then after that, so health over here, this RPC is going to get, this RPC function is going to get run on every single person's computer. They're all going to take the same exact amount of health off the current hit points. They're all going to check to see if the hit points are below 0, and if so, it's going to die. Let's see what that does. So I'll do Control B to build. Boom, 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 boom. Hit play. Hopefully I haven't made any sort of huge error. We're going to find out. Connect up to the server. Okay. Go back over here. Make sure everything's got focused properly. Hit play. So we should see both objects or both players in the game again. You know, I don't know why it does this. It's the very first time it gets run on my computer. It will do like a Windows error weirdness, and then it goes away after a second. I apologize for that. Let me go and quit and then wait. I actually get like a pop-up in Windows. I think I've got some sort of weird firewall thing going on, and so I definitely apologize for that. It may even have something to do with the recording. I don't know. Come on, unstick. You can do it. I ran a couple of tests, and it's the first time that it gets run sort of in a new build. Okay. Well, maybe I'll force quit. Well, the funny thing is, I don't necessarily need to force quit Unity. It's a very bizarre issue. End task. Let me try it again. Actually, I saw the error has something to do with flash weirdness. I don't know what's going on. See, it runs fine here, and I think it will run fine now. If I go and build settings, everything is being built the way it should be, yes. Just do a build and run. Sorry about this, guys. Get it going. It's something to do with my computer. Maybe I should reinstall Unity, and actually, I think there's been an update to Unity. I haven't been wanting to update, but now I'm thinking that maybe I should. Okay, let's try this again. So over here, hit play. Joining, there we go. And it's specifically when it hits that joining step that something weird happens on the computer. Okay, so now we've got our two characters going on there. Character 1 and 2 can do a spin around. So now I'm going to shoot this cube, and it should go away on both people's computers. Or not. Or we're going to get a some sort of null reference exception. Let me try to shoot it from this side to see what happens. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. What did I do? Oh! Did I not just... Oh, maybe I didn't save the... Maybe I didn't save this. So it's complaining because it didn't have a photon view. It was getting to this line and not finding the photon view. In fact, I suppose, for my sake, I should do this more explicitly here. I should do something like photon view PV equals this. If PV equals null, debug.log error. Freak out! Else. Yeah, I know I have the best error messages. Very, very informative. More importantly, it'll show up in the log and it'll tell you what line the problem is happening on. Alright, so now it's got the photon view scene. Let's make sure everything is saved. Let's build it again. Hope we don't get a crash. Whoops, not quit. And notice I've got this, this pop-up stuck from... Alright, let's try this again. Control B. This time for sure. Hit play. Get this window going. Alright, that's connected. Hit play over here. There we are. Our positions are synchronized. Now, let's see. I really have to get to the point where we lock this mouse because it's getting to be a little annoying. And if I click, there! I blew up the crate on both screens. Did you see it? It disappeared from both views. If I go back over here, I also won't be able to see the crate at all. So, that is working-ish. It's working for this crate, and it is correctly working for the crate. This will not properly work for our network character. The reason is this destroy line. Now, I will also say there's a bunch of different ways of doing this. One of the things we could decide to do is instead of having player shoot tell all the players that the hit points on this crate have changed, instead what we could do is just tell maybe the master. So there is a master client. Generally speaking, it's the first person who sort of created and joined the room. Okay, the game that you're in, the first person in there, that person will be the master. You can see if you are the master by doing photon network.is master client. It's a Boolean, true or false, whether you are the master client or not. So what you could do is you could call take damage only on the master client, and that way you have someone sort of authoritative see what the actual, deal with all the damage code properly. And then you could have another function for updating the hit points on everyone's client. That way if you want to do like, you want something to look damaged, then you could send from here, first thing you do is, is master client. If false, return immediately. Don't do anything. Otherwise, I am the master. Okay, I have permission to sort of modify hit points here, and then I will send an update out to all the clients at that point to say, well, here's what the actual hit points are properly should be. The other thing you could do is you could make this die function kind of an RPC, which you might have to do for a variety of reasons. You might have some sort of trap or effect that can happen in the game world that kills something instantly. It has nothing to do with taking damage. I mean, the shortcut is you send like take damage, infinity damage, guaranteeing that you're going to kill anything. But the alternative is you could have things in the game that you might just want to kill things directly, bypassing any sort of damage and vulnerability or craziness like that. In which case, you could make die into an RPC. and then call that. And that, that might work fine too. So there's different ways of making this logic. I'm going to try to keep it simple here. So this health works good for crates. Now, can we just apply this code to players? And again, I'm making the case that I cannot. There's some sort of, my mono develop is like in front of everything. Oh, there's something really weird going on there. Yeah, I was doing some lookups and making sure that everything is working properly. All right, hopefully the everything is going wonky here. I couldn't get back to Unity from mono develop. Okay, there we go. Now they're going back and forth properly. All right, so let's apply this health script to our player. Okay, so we're going to go into player stuff, resources, our player here. We're going to give him a health, and it can be active for all characters. That's fine. All characters can have health. I mean, health doesn't do anything by itself. It doesn't respond to player input, so it can be active on everyone, and that's okay. Now, let's find out if we can kill each other. And the answer is going to be sort of ish, but it will generate errors. So again, I will do a build and run here. And start this. Actually, I can just shove this window aside. Keep it running in the background. Just waiting for it to start properly. Okay, and then over here, I'm going to hit play. Joining, there we go. Okay, both players, of course, are in the same place. Now, I'm going to go ahead and shoot this guy. Boom! Oh, yeah, and players have 100 health, and our gun does 25 damage, so I'm going to have to shoot him 4 times in total. I've shot him twice, 3rd time, and 4th time. 5th time? All right. I'm legitimately confused. Let me switch this view here. I can switch this view to debug, and it'll show me things that I don't normally have the ability to change. Current hit points are not changing. That's quite bizarre. I'm hitting player controller clone. It's definitely what's showing up in the messages here. We're not actually taking damage. I can still shoot the box, right? I cannot shoot the box. What have I done? Oh, this client is frozen. You know, I think I might have to put a cut in here and actually go and just make sure that I've got Unity fully updated, because something is just randomly happening. Or maybe I've got to reboot my computer. There's a few different things that could be going on here. Because these sort of errors are not, like, if I was making errors in Unity, I would be getting a slightly different error results. Yeah, it's on join. Okay, so that's fine. Let me move you over here. Let's try that again. Moving there. Okay, this is still active. Good. Shoot the crate. Crate went away over here, but not over here. Oh, maybe there is still something wrong. Okay, and I'm not... my player got destroyed and the camera went away. So it's not actually hung. It's just not updating. Oh! Did I... I was making an argument here about doing this, but I don't actually want this master client thing. I want to go back to all. We're going to talk about all buffered later too. Okay, so what was happening is the hit point damage was only being sent to the master client and wasn't being propagated to all the clients. And because inside of the Unity editor I'm joining second, I'm not the master client, so I wasn't actually seeing the changes. There's still the problem that when I kill the guy who exists in this window, his camera is still going to stop working because the camera is part of his character and I'm just deleting the entire character. All right, let's try this one more time. I'm looking for errors. What I keep getting shocked about is I'm not getting errors. All right, let's try this again. I mean, I'm getting this animator binding thing, but that's slightly different. We're not gonna stress about that. So let me shoot this crate. Boom, correctly goes away on both computers. Good. Now let me shoot this guy. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So I shot him, he disappeared. Over on this side, again, things are frozen just because there's no camera here anymore. So it just got the last image that was on the screen just like frozen in there. So that's working as intended. Okay. And we got an error message here. On destroy for photon view 1001 on player controller clone, but game object is still in instantiated objects. So what is going on there? So what is going on is inside of health here, when we take our lethal damage and we call die, in die we're calling destroy game object. This happens without complaint for our crate because our crate is just a game object that exists in the level itself, right? It's here in the editor, it's right there in the game. But our players get instantiated over the network, and those objects, let me try to think about the best way to explain this. Here, all players get the message that someone is taking damage, and then all players go and destroy their own game object. And this sort of kind of works for the players themselves, except photon networking keeps an array, keeps a pool of all objects that were instantiated over the network and who the owners are. And if you just destroy something like this, you're destroying it in a non-networked way. So the correct way to destroy something that was instantiated over the network is to call photon network dot destroy. And then you pass it the game object. Right? So it looks exactly the same as this version. So why not just do this? And in fact, this will work beautifully for the players. Ish. The problem is this call will whine if we try to delete the crate, because it will say, whoa, this is not something I instantiated. Why are you calling destroy this way? Now, in my opinion, this should almost just it should just work for both. You know, it shouldn't whine and throw up an error and fail to destroy the object if it wasn't something that you actually instantiated over network. It should just call this. But it doesn't, and maybe it's good that it's explicit. The other thing is, this function here, I believe you basically only want to call this. Well, I think any client potentially could call this. Don't quote me on that exactly. But ideally, this should only be called by the client that owns the object, or possibly the master client. And so what we're going to do here is do just that. When die gets called on an object, first we're going to check to see if it was instantiated. And we can do that pretty easily. We can use get component photon view. And then there's a instantiation ID. And this will be 0. This will be 0 for things that weren't instantiated. These are things that existed naturally in the scene. So we can do something like, okay, if instantiated ID is equal to 0, then this is something that just existed in the scene, and we can probably just go and destroy it. Otherwise, this is something that was instantiated over the network, and so we need to destroy it this way. But most importantly, only one client needs to call this. If every client calls this, and right now this is what happens. So there's you and me are both in the game, a crate gets destroyed. The person doing the shooting sends take damage to everyone in the game, and then everyone in the game calls die, and then everyone in the game then destroys the game object. And this is fine because this only operates on your personal local copy of that object. But if everyone in the game calls the networked version of it, then the network gets multiple messages to delete something. But it only needs that once. So what we're going to do is we're only going to destroy this game object, this network instantiated game object, if what? Well, either if it's ours or if we're the master client. Either one is fine. And for this purpose, I will only allow the master client. So if we are the master client, then we will send the network command to destroy this object. Otherwise, we'll just ignore it and wait. And this will cause us to be able to kill our soldier people without getting errors thrown up in our face. So let me go ahead and do a build. It's a subtle thing, but it's not just about getting rid of an error message in the log. It's about fixing a sort of logic error that could come bite you in the butt in some other fashion after the fact. So just waiting here. Okay, so client number 1 is connected. Let's move it to the other side of the box. Let me grab this guy, move it to my other screen, start up another session over here. Okay, there's the player. So I'm going to, it's tricky to line up everything. There we go, tab out, bring this guy over here. We're gonna have this guy shoot the box, which should still work. It should blow up the box on both screens. And indeed it does. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot this other character. Actually, I'm going to do it from this screen so I get the log. I'm going to shoot this guy 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. This guy is dead, and again, his camera is not responding, which, we obviously have to deal with this in a more elegant fashion, but that's fine. And then over here, we got no actual, we got no error message. We did get an entry in the log that says that, hey, we're destroying something, but that's okay. That's good. That's actually very nice that we have records that things are being destroyed over the network. So now our health is being synchronized. Every client in the game will know what the health, everything that's got a health, every client in the game, we will agree on what the health of that thing is. And if that thing should die, every client in the game will correctly deal with that death. And again, I apologize for not making the font bigger again here. Every time I close Mono Develop, it's got to reset the zoom. I don't know if I can change that by default. Probably. Fonts. Edit. Wow, there we go. I guess it would be that. You know what? I'll mess with that some other time. Although I actually do want the smaller font when I'm working on my own, so we'll see what we can do. So yeah, so the health is synchronized, the death is synchronized. Now, with our people, as opposed to our crates, because our people are instantiated at runtime, as a result, their photon view, let me get out of debug mode over here, go back to normal. As a result, their photon view does correctly observe the network character script, and in the network character script, the on photon serialized view properly gets called. You could synchronize health in here to a certain extent, but I think that because of the way this represents sort of one-time events, this is not something that's got to be updated 20 times per second, which the position does. The health doesn't. The health only needs an update sent out when there's a change. Now, technically, with the photon view, you can change how it sends information back and forth. And right now I have it set to reliable delta compressed. This is actually the slowest of the update options. There's unreliable and unreliable on change, and then reliable delta compressed. Reliable delta compressed ensures that the updates get sent to each client and arrive in order, and the delta means it only transmits the changes, and it does try to zip everything up to make it a little bit smaller. So it runs it every frame, it grows and calls the on serialized. Where is that? Calls on photon serialized view, and then out of everything that gets put in here, it first of all just strips out what the changes are and then zips it up and then sends it. And then the clients on the other side will always make sure that things are arriving in the right order and that you haven't missed a packet, because that can happen. On the internet, packets get dropped from time to time. And there's different protocols, TCP, UDP, and all kinds of nonsense and whatever. And this will ensure that the packets always arrive at all the players in the correct order and that none of them have ever been dropped. That means it can repeat packages and do whatever and fill in those gaps. But it's actually a little bit slow because there's some overhead in doing that. And so if you use the unreliable or unreliable on chain, you actually end up with slightly faster transmission rates, because it's sort of just firing this stuff out there and it doesn't care literally if it arrives and in what order it arrives, because the internet can be weird. Packets can sometimes get there in a different order than they were sent, but there's less overhead. Now, this unreliable stuff tends to actually be perfectly groovy with positions, because they'll all kind of work out and, excuse me, a frog in my throat. They'll all kind of work out and arrive and get there in the end. If there's things arrive in a slightly different order, it's not the end of the world. And I think it will be smart enough to at least discard information. If you get a packet that arrives that is older than the last one, that is older than the last one it received, it will just drop that packet. What unreliable mostly means is that you sometimes packets will get dropped, which includes if they arrive in the wrong order, one will simply be discarded, and that's okay for the position, because you're just going to move to the latest position that you got. And yeah, so you may have missed a frame in between, so you didn't realize he was moving forward and then took one little side step to the left and then one little side step to the right. You lose that, but it doesn't mean much on the network. Now, the RPCs, I believe, are always sent reliably. So I tend to just use reliable delta compression because my games are simple enough and I don't need to hardcore optimize the networking, so it's the lazy option. But you read up on the documentation what these different things mean and where you want to use the different ones. I don't remember how I got on that tangent. Like, represents something that's way more complex than I was actually hoping to deal with. But hey, we've got our guys running around, shooting each other, and it all works. So all the core functionality of a shooter is actually in place. Obviously, what we want to do is a few things. We're going to want to do some sort of user interfacey kind of things. We're going to have we want to have a respawning work, especially right now. The fact that when you die, it deletes. Not only does it destroy the character, but the character has the camera inside of it, so it destroys the camera too, and leads to a frozen screen, which is no good. So we're going to deal with a few of those issues. And then what we'll do is we may talk about some of the more advanced FPS stuff. But I think the core tutorial is going to end kind of when we have respawning and a little bit of a graphic user interface. And then we'll sort of have an extended episodes at some point in the future that deal with different weapon types. How do you pick up different weapons? How do you do health pickups, armor pickups, all those sorts of goodnesses. And those can more or less have... Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, but... We're gonna try to have sort of discrete packets that you can watch or not watch as we go. Anyway, that is it for this episode. See you guys next time.